All right, welcome back to another episode of the Design Build Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. Tonight, I've got Dylan from Kansas and Jake from Michigan joining me, and we are going to talk about, guys, what I think is probably one of my favorite topics, because when my mind shifts towards these specific things every year, I start to think kind of like what Dylan said in the previous episode, where he said, hey, we're a growing season away. You know, it helps me really realize like how close deer season really is. Like it's just a couple of months out. When I start thinking about my kill plots and, you know, what I'm going to put in them this year, or planning a new kill plot in an area that didn't have one, like when I'm really thinking about those things, I realize, okay, season is right around the corner, and I'm thinking and talking about a spot where it may actually go down. So I joked with you guys before we hopped on here. What lingo are we going to use here? Are we going to call them kill plots, micro plots, hidey hole plots? What are these things?
Poor man plots, pass through, staging plots, you name it.
Yeah. What are we going to call them? I have no idea. Dylan, we need your suggestion.
I like to stick with the poor man. Jake's spot on with that. That's usually how they go. I mean, it's always a dream, you know. It seems like every year. That's what's fun about it, though. I mean, to be honest, it's that's what's more about for me. It's just the anticipation of it. Not so much that they always produce, you know, but just looking ahead to that growing season. And you may have a complete failure. Mother Nature's not nice to us, hasn't been very nice to us in the last few years in our neck of the woods. But either way, it's just that's part of the anticipation, the build up, and the final reward when you are successful, you know. And just knowing that you're providing something better out there. To me, the older I get, and the less it becomes about the harvest. You know, it's about what are you doing to kind of give back, and just carving out these little areas that are just you know, little pieces of heaven for the wildlife. You know, you kind of get a little bit soft with it. As much as we love to chase them, we also improve the habitat tenfold.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's when, you know, growing up, I just knew them as food plots. Like there was no, you know, I remember I was on a WMA as a probably 15-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid, and I saw my very first 5-acre food plot. Like it was a true 5 acres. And I walked into that thing, I was like, I might as well be in Iowa right now. Like just looking at the size of what felt like an agricultural field. But you know, looking back, we were shooting deer in 10th, you know, 0.1, 0.2 acre plots. Like that was normal to us. And that was all we knew for food plots. And so now it's kind of all the rage to have a couple of small food plots on your property. So I just want to kick off the conversation by asking the question, why in the world would we, if we may have other larger destination plots, why are we putting work, effort, time, money into creating smaller kill plots, staging plots, whatever it is that you want to call them? What's all the hubbub about, Dylan?
Well, I think it's just identifying what's going to be different, giving them that candy store, you know, that incentive to come out early. And really, I think the longer I've been doing this, the smaller my plots have gotten, at least around the staging areas and the spots that I want them to kind of transition through. You're basically kind of putting that carrot out just a little bit ahead, and getting them to kind of work, and you know, like Sam talks about, meandering plots, you know, and just giving them that path to that destination, I think is kind of what to me is motivating and design and figuring out, you know, the smaller size isn't really a hindrance. That you think about these mature deer and their security and everything else that we're trying to build into this with screening, and like we just talked about in that last podcast, the smaller we go with this, the more secure they're going to feel in it. I mean, to an extent, I mean, obviously depending on your deer density and that kind of thing, you want to create safe feeding locations as well, to where they can kind of disperse. But I think just keeping that movement pattern throughout the corridors leading into them, I mean, it's just a fun puzzle to put together.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, essentially we're talking about these much smaller plots. They're not going to be our destination plots, right? Like they're not the place we want the deer to end up in the evening, but we're places that we think a mature buck would feel comfortable stepping out in daylight, or does, if that's what you're after. Maybe you're not getting any deer in your larger food plots in daylight, and does are your target. Then absolutely get in there into these smaller plots, harvest some does if that is what if that's your target animal, right? Like if that's your quarry for the day. Um, let's talk a little bit about location for these, because I think, as I think look back at like food plot failures from my life, ones that I've tried, I think missing the location piece, like just getting it wrong as to where I put this in proximity to cover and other food sources, is probably my number one mistake. Like that's probably the one thing. Other people might think it's like, getting the plot just right, or like there's a lot of anxiety around like, did I get good enough growth in these small plots? Because it can be tough, but really location, location, location is key when it comes to these plots. So Jake, let's kick it off with you talking about the location. What goes into where you're putting these plots?
So a lot of the properties that I work on and the ones that I hunt on, they're smaller properties. Like there's 70 acres on down. The ones I hunt on, and I think I don't know, on average this year, the average property size has been about 40 to 60 acres in that range. So these are not large properties. So it's not like we're having, a destination on one side and a destination on the other. A lot of times it's on these properties, it's kind of bedding heavy on one side of the property, and then we're drawing them to more of like a food heavy side on the opposite end of the property. And most of the guys that I've been working with, and my properties are no different, we don't have the fields to actually put in a destination type food plot. Most of the guys I work with, so we have to put in these staging plots, these kill plots. They're like the meandering plot, to basically lead these deer to the destination. And so I would say that the location is kind of just off of the destination. So within our property borders, you still want to have it within your property borders. So you have hunting opportunities, and you want to make sure that there's some buffer there so you can get around these plots. But I would say that if you have a neighboring ag field, and that's where those deer want to go at night, if you have the opportunity to, that's where I would try to put those food plots in, as towards that end of the property. The deer want to go that way, so then give them a place to stop. Give them a few different food plots on that end of the property, so depending on the wind direction, you still have an area to hunt. But that's where those deer are going to stage for a little bit, and then they're going to disperse off to the ag field. And then most likely this is where design comes in, because you can put different bedding areas in, so hopefully you can kind of get those does moving through first. But then what you and Dylan alluded to is, with these smaller plots, those bucks are going to feel a lot safer in there. They would much rather feed within the security of that small plot, as opposed to stepping out into that giant ag field in daylight. They're going to sit in that small plot until it gets dark, or they're just going to step into that plot as it gets dark. So you still have a hunting opportunity there, as opposed to if you're sitting on the big ag field like a lot of guys do, you never see that buck, because he's within your small kill plot, within your small poor man plot, because that's where he feels safe. So I would say location, if you're able to back it off that destination a little bit, just because that's where those deer want to go anyways.
Right. Yeah. Very, very good. And one thing to keep in mind with these plots, Dylan, you said the word ice cream, I think, a little bit earlier. So like these are plots where we're going to be planting something that is highly attractive, but they're not necessarily the sole source of nutrition that we're banking on in an area. I think that's important to mention. I was listening to some a podcast put out by Mississippi State University Deer Lab, I think is what it's called. Had some great information on this specific episode, where they were talking about buck use of food plots, and what they found was like that 4 acre range for a food plot was kind of ideal, because it had really high buck use. But I think a majority of that is at night. So these plots are not plots that we're intending for deer to hang around in for very long, right? Like we're intending these to be passed through. They're hitting these on the way to these larger food sources. And we're really creating ambush locations. Essentially, we're not trying to create, hey, this is, they're going to get all of their nutrition from right here. So um, let's get a little bit into, what are some of the things that create and cause some of these plots maybe not to be as productive as they should be. Failures from all sorts of different directions. Failure number one would be like there's no crop growing, like I planted, did all the work, and nothing happened. Number two would be like I planted, now there's no deer using the plot. Number three would be there's no deer during daylight. So, what are some of the things that can cause a food plot plan or a kill plot plan? Some of those execution mistakes that might keep them from really being as fruitful as they could be.
I'll touch
Well,
on.
I'll say,
Go ahead, Dylan. You go first.
oh, okay. Just real quick, yeah. I'd say from my viewpoint, it's typically been on my end, not so much the deer. It's something related to managing, whether it's the grasses or the weed control or something with that plot establishment that I probably failed at more so than even Mother Nature, and sometimes, and that failure there has cost me more times than necessarily even Mother Nature, to be honest with you. And it's just a matter of what you've got available. We talked about poor man plots. I've kind of scratched by, with different implements and more so than other people too. So I'm not complaining there, but at the same time, you got to think about that and what are your goals and what type of equipment, what's your access like to get to those locations. That's going to determine a lot of what you can do, and really and just keeping that in mind on what your limits are too. And you're not going to grow 200 bushel corn in spots that you can't, get equipment or have the site prep and the needs that it needs for all your, fertilizer needs and everything. So what you put into it is definitely, there's a direct relation to what you get out of it. We don't have the pressure like you guys have probably with the densities as much. So it's typically showing, it kind of comes back on you that you did something wrong on your end.
Yeah, that's good. Jake, what about you?
I was going to say a lot of the failures, like if you're noticing your crop's not growing, there could be a couple things. One is there's no sunlight. A lot of these small kill plots, these pass-through plots, they're in the timber. And so like you have to do a lot of work with taking these trees down in order to get the sunlight to that site for the crop to grow. And a lot of what we're planting in these small kill plots, depending on the size, like if you're talking tenth of an acre, eighth of an acre, they're the more browse tolerant crops. Like up here it's a lot of cereal rye, a lot of clovers. Maybe you can get away with some brassica in like those lower deer density areas, or maybe if you have more food on your property to disperse these deer from to different plots. But if you don't have sunlight in there, nothing's going to grow. So that would be one of the things I would look for first: is do you have sun, and is it primarily, do you have open sun to the south, because that's where that sun's going to be in the fall. Another thing, like if the deer aren't using the plot, I would say maybe it's over pressuring. Like first, I would look to your camera, because you probably have a camera on this small plot. And if are they using the plot, but maybe just at night, or are they not using it at all? Then it would maybe be like, okay, is the location in the wrong spot, or maybe uh, maybe that there's too much pressure nearby that they don't like it. Like so, that's where like the last episode comes in. Everything needs to be screened off, even these small kill plots. So if you have this small attractive kill plot and it's right next to a bedding area and it's not screened off, well, that you're telling the deer every time you're coming in, and they're probably just going to be exiting the back side of that bedding area, and you didn't even know it, and they're just going to be going they're going to loop their way around to the destination the other way.
Right. Yeah. And that's another one. We've talked about proximity to a destination food source or something like that. That proximity to cover is a mistake that I made early on in my solo food plotting career. We'll say, when I was just striking out on my own, I'm not planting food plots with the rest of the guys at my camp. I've got my own place, and we're trying to plant a little plot. And I went in there and I planted a plot, and it came up and it looked beautiful. I rented a tiller from Home Depot. On the side of this mountain, I broke every tooth but two off of that tiller. That was when I learned the importance of buying insurance, and I had bought the insurance. And so I was able to walk out of there with a smile on my face, and swore I would always buy insurance on rented tools from now on. But once the leaves started to fall off the trees, I got into November, and this is an area where, late December, early January rut. We got into mid November, late November, and there are no leaves left on the trees. And I would go up there and sit in that food plot, and I'd sit in my, 20-foot ladder stand, double man ladder stand. And I can see 450 yards, through the timber. And I'm like, there are no deer anywhere around this food plot. So yeah, they're getting here at night, but they're definitely not getting here during the day because they're the closest good cover nearby is very far away. And at this point, I wasn't thinking anything like, well, let's just create cover right here. No, that would have been too easy. I just totally ignored it and kept planting this useless food plot. But yeah, proximity to cover is a huge, huge thing. Let's talk a little bit about your the sizes on these. We've mentioned, really, really small. What what are the sizes that are, how small is too small? How big is too big for it to really be considered one of these kind of, or not destination, but like kill plots?
Uh,
Well, Josh, we talked about some of the studies that you were talking about before this started, and some of the benefits you can do. I don't necessarily know that too small is really even a thing, especially when we're talking about timber management and that kind of thing. The amount of browse that you can create doing something like that, and I would consider those kill plots as well. Different things, and we talked about some growing season burns. Potentially, you're going to get some grasses and forbs, and maybe not as much up to where Jake's at later, but if you do some of that, that's another thing that I don't think the size limitation is that big of a deal. But I will say you kind of want to make sure it's proportionate to what you're dealing with. If you're in large ag country and you've got a lot of cover, I think you may have to go larger if your deer density, really needs that to support that plot and not make it detrimental to the health of that plot and making it last later into the season. That's going to be kind of a trial and error thing. I think we're never done learning on this stuff, and that's where years of experience. That's why we're all here. We've learned the hard way on a lot of things, and so it's fun to I guess do a trial run. That's part of the fun, in my opinion. And really, those failures, they're not necessarily. I don't look at them as always a negative. You're growing from that, and hey, chalk it up as something you probably won't do again.
That's right. You bought the experience with your sweat and tears
Yeah,
over this food plot that didn't turn out. Do you guys remember there was a product that was basically it created like a carpet of a food plot.
yeah.
It came in a thing you could like roll it out. What was that?
I think if it's the one I'm remembering, I think it was actually a lot of ryegrass, which isn't.
Yeah.
It'll grow in about any condition, but it's really not desirable at all. It's the big if a lot of people they think they're planting cereal rye and they go to the store and they end up getting ryegrass, and it's not the same.
Yeah, yeah, not the same at all. Not the same at all. So, when it comes to what you're planting, then if ryegrass isn't what we want to be throwing out there, what do we want to plant in these smaller plots?
Well, I know for me, I don't necessarily look at a kill plot as something I'm hunting directly over either. That's another thing that I think you can get creative with, even especially if you're in farm country and you're on permission ground. One of the best things we can do around us is, towards the end of that kind of as the leaves defoliate, with soybeans, you're going into a condition there that's better than you would have been able to prep. You got people doing it for a living, ag, on the ag side. Most of them actually, they'll encourage you to if you're going to provide the seed, do the planting, you're putting in, say a tillage radish or going in there with wheat, rye, that kind of thing that's good for the soil. They're going to be prepping it again for the next year. You're not hurting the soil. A lot of times you can get an in getting some plots established in places you wouldn't typically be able to.
Yeah. So a lot of times those are anything that's not going to be detrimental to their crop the following year. They're going to
Right.
be more than you throw it out there. Jake, what are you putting in these smaller
it kind of
plots?
depends on the size of the plot and again, kind of the deer density in the area. So I'll kind of go back to that previous question you asked, like how large is too large or how small is too small. Kind of depends on again like the area that you're in. So I just wrapped up a design for somebody who he's in a mixed ag country. I'd say heavy on the ag, maybe 60-70% ag, 30-40% cover in the area, and he has about on his 60 acres, I think it was about 2.5 acres of food plot, but it's all connected. So it's not just a 2.5 acre field, it's 2.5 acres of small plots connected to each other. It kind of just looks like a big turkey foot and then a turkey foot off the turkey foot. Just everything is kind of just trails everywhere, but it's all food. But it adds up to about 2.5 acres. But from one spot, you can't see the other spot. So it's all compartmentalized. But within that area, because it is a larger area, we can get pretty creative. We can just have a blend of a lot of different things. Just kind of throw the kitchen sink at them. So a lot of annual, with grains. We can, with oats, cereal rye. We could throw annual clovers in there, crimson clover, medium red clover. We can throw a brassica mix in there. With brassicas, I really like the Sweet Feast brassica from John Comp. That's probably the best brassica mix out there. You can throw some peas. You could throw some beans in there. Now they're not going to develop pods, but they're still going to have the leaves on there, which are highly attractive. So we can do a lot of different things, or you can split the plot, because a lot of these plots kind of run through the property like more like a river. So you can actually split them down the middle if you want to have more like that rotation where you do brassicas on one side, more of like your grains and clovers on the other side, and just flip them year to year. So you can get pretty creative with what you're doing. But again, it kind of comes back to the size of the plot and deer density. If I have a really small food plot that's kind of isolated, let's say it's an eighth of an acre, tenth of an acre in size, and it's kind of off by itself, high deer density, I'm probably going to stick with clovers and rye, just because I know that those are the only two crops that are really going to withstand that browse pressure, that are going to be able to uh, keep going throughout the majority of the hunting season. I don't want to put a brassica mix in there and then have them mow it down to the dirt, and then I come in there to hunt late October and I'm just hunting over dirt. That's it's not going to be a draw anymore. So I want to make sure that I still have something green in there. So it really just kind of depends on how your food plot system works. How big is the plot? How large is your deer density? That's going to be a big determining factor. But you can get creative with what you put out. Like what Dylan says, just experiment. If something doesn't work one year, just make a note of it and say, okay, I got to either dial back the brassicas and go heavier on the cereal rye, or you know what, maybe I came into spring with tons of rye and clover. Maybe I can dial that stuff back and I can go more on the brassicas. They didn't hit it as hard as I thought, so, or maybe I have less deer than I thought. I can increase one thing or decrease something else. So just get creative, experiment. That's what I like to do. Just keep switching things up.
Right, right. Yeah, very good. Let's talk about size and shape, right? So we're thinking a little bit maybe on the larger side of what would be considered a kill plot, and we talk a lot about food plot architecture. That's important for us. And I heard you mention there the turkey foot coming off of a turkey foot. Like, man, that's a lot. Sounds like a lot going on on that specific property. So I'm curious for you guys: are there go-to shapes or structures for these plots? Or are you just kind of given or taking what the land gives you? And I know for me, for instance, there are some plots where we're pretty intentional, but there are other plots too that, just given the size, I'm going to be able to shoot the whole thing anyway. Like, it really doesn't matter if a deer steps into the field; he's in bow range.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both there. So if it's one of those smaller pasture plots or kill plots, poor man plots in the timber, a lot of times, like, I'm just slowly clearing out the area year by year. Like if it's just me with a chainsaw, I'm just slowly making it bigger, and I am trying to shape it in a way that encourages deer travel. So if I know that the destination is in one direction and the bedding is in the other, I will try to make it kind of like a linear plot that kind of runs uh, perpendicular with my access. So that way the deer are always moving in front of me. I will try to shape it that way and then slowly over time make it larger. But if I'm able to, like, let's say I have a, a large field that sky is the limit, blank slate on what you can create here. Then I do like to try to, like, it's almost like a river. Like, it's like a river of green through, and I like to border it with switchgrass, so you can really shape these food plots, direct deer, and you're moving the deer from one side of the property or one side of the plot to the other. And so the deer are never really staying in one spot for very long. Depending on the wind direction, you have opportunities from different stands. So one side of the food plot might be better for a southwest. If you have a north wind, you can be on the other side of the food plot. But the deer are going to give both stands opportunities based on the way that it's shaped. And like, you can uh, kind of like the oxbows in the river. You can kind of hook those deer right in front of your stand location, put a mock scrape there, put a couple soft mash trees right there, give them more incentive to stop right there. And it's, as long as they're unpressured, deer are fairly predictable. They're going to follow that edge of that food plot, and so you can really direct traffic with food. But so it's not, you can take what was a wide open field, no consistency, no rhyme or reason for why deer are moving one way or the other. You put some screening in there, you shape it a little bit, and you can really direct traffic. So I would say that that's kind of the way that I shape it. Is I try to shape it to different stand locations. I try to encourage deer movement, from the bedding towards the destination, or maybe if I'm trying to hook the deer away from the neighbors, I'll kind of do like a half moon or like a boomerang shape to just kind of guide the deer in a different direction. That doesn't mean they're never going to go that way. It just means that I'm not going to encourage them to go that way. I'm trying to turn them. And so a lot of times, so they're going to turn more often or more times than they would have if you didn't shape it that way.
Right. Right. That's good. That's good. Dylan, do you have any go-to, shape or structure to these plots?
Yeah, I'll say I've kind of learned from that mistake of going larger, thinking that as I was younger, man, I thought the larger the better. I'm going to hold twice the deer that we ever have had in this location. And I've actually kind of gone backwards and gone the other direction, and I don't really like to look at these food plots really any longer as just that single dynamic. I'm looking at all the other kind of the anticipation. You think about the testosterone as that builds through the rut, those does and fawns, they're going to make their way through there pretty early on out to the destination. And, those big mature bucks, when the time's right, it's competition, so you got to have different things along that way, including your food plots as that additional. But I'm big on mock scrapes, and I really feel like that's a strong suit to add with plots in your way in transition through the corridor into those plots and beyond that, including, we've talked about fruit trees on here, different times of the year, certain things that are attracting. But I really kind of leaned a lot on the natural progressions, and I love topography. So if I can naturally see deer congregating in certain places, or places where they would hang even with natural browse, just kind of adding in small little supplemental type plots in there with what's already there that makes them feel safe. You can go too far. You really can. I mean, I think you can take away those desirable locations by doing too much or thinking you're just providing so much better with a food plot when really there's a good balance in there.
Yeah, and I really like what both of you have alluded to. It's that, these food plots are not a fix all. Like putting in a kill plot is not going to be the thing that gets all the deer all of a sudden showing up in front of you. You guys have both talked about mock scrapes in these plots. You've both talked about fruit trees in these plots. We've talked about location for these plots. We're basically putting these where the deer are going to be anyway. We're not putting them kind of in an off the wall place that deer don't want to go there and try to bring the deer there, because that's going to be a bit of an uphill battle for you. But guys, real quick, as kind of a way to close this out, give me like a quick, you know, procedure for how can I get one of these plots planted if I don't have a lot of equipment. Like I don't have a lot of stuff. I want to get a plot in the ground. What do I need to do?
I've put it in a plot with just a chainsaw in a backpack. So yeah, 3 pieces of equipment: chainsaw, backpack sprayer, and a seeder. That's all I've used. And so if you have a location that this is a great spot for a little pass-through plot on the way to the destination. You have decent access getting in there. You just got to start taking some trees down. Like if you're in the timber setting, take the trees down. You're going to get some growth. You might have to get the leaves out of there, so either a rake or a backpack blower. But yeah, spray the weeds. Make sure that you're seeding into a weed-free seed bed, and then you just need some sort of a seeder to put the seeds on the ground. And if you are in a field setting, an open area setting, you don't need the chainsaw. You just need the sprayer, because you do need to seed into like a weed-free seed bed. You got to have a clean seed bed when you're planting anything. So I would say that would be the biggest thing that I would say is one, like Dylan always says, go do it, right? Just go do it. But the 3 things that you'll need, the bare minimum: chainsaw, backpack sprayer, and a seeder, which are all fairly inexpensive. It's not like you have to go buy a tractor to put in a little food plot. You could put one in this season.
Right. Very good. Dylan, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mentioned this in another podcast, but as we get later into summer and you feel like you've missed the boat, once we turn in our area past 4th of July, it can get dry as a bone and things can really turn. If you can get a good kill on some grass, if you've got a spot picked out and you just haven't had the time to do anything, getting that killed, and then safely burnt off. I say safely, making sure you have the right equipment, get that burnt off. You've got all that basically free fertilizer right there. And then coming into that first year grass stand, it's some of the best soil, best root structure with, plenty of organic matter in it. You'll have some unbelievable plots. I've done that, had really good luck. My dad and I early on, I cleared a spot that, I mean, it busted us both, but basically took the chainsaw type blades you can get on a weed eater, took out a bunch of the just woody structure brush thickets, but really didn't have any grass competition. Went back with clover on the first year, and it was incredible. So I think, yeah, just getting out there and doing something, you're not throwing a lot away. A little bit of sweat equity, I think, can go a long way, and you can do some good.
Very good. Well, guys, you've got plenty of time, folks. If you want to get some kill plots in, you've got plenty of time to get those areas cleared out, and it's not going to require a lot. Chainsaw, sprayer, seeder, maybe a rake or a backpack blower if you want to save that. If not, drop a match and then call Dylan, ask him how to get the fire out. I kid. But hey, when we're talking small spots like that, controlling a fire within that can actually be quite simple. Rake or blow a good fire break for yourself, burn just a little bit at a time, and you'll be surprised at how quick it goes. And, once you're done, that seed bed's going to be perfect. So guys, thanks for joining me tonight, folks. If you have questions about kill plots or anything else, be sure to check out our other episodes, all of our YouTube content, and lots of great articles on our website.